Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Hello Bluebird's Garden Friends, Garden Party, Bloomin' Happy, and Cake Time. So I have stamped those images out on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. And I'm going to be coloring to match some pattern paper from the Cartabella Flora No. 6 pattern paper pad. So I'll tear out the sheet that I want to use as my color inspiration and tuck that under my cardstock panel. I'm using my Copic markers and I'm going to start with the little frog. I want to bring out some of the lighter greens in the leaves of that pattern paper. So I went with YG11, YG13, and YG17 for him. Starting with that YG17 and laying in some shadows. Since he's facing completely forward, his shadows are going to be equal on both the left and the right. So I'm putting that on the outer edges of his face, underside of his arms and legs, and a little bit on the sides of his belly. And then I'll start blending that out with the YG13, just pulling that color out toward the center. So once I have that all laid in, I'm going to come in with the YG11. And here is where I realized that I was going to want to have a fourth shade in there, just on the lower part of the face and on the belly. I wanted that to be a bit softer. So I'm going to use that YG11 and pull that color even more toward the center. I'll fill in the arms and feet and all of that with that YG11. But I am going to leave some space in the middle of the body. And for that, I'm going to bring in G20 because it's a very pale shade and it has just a little bit of a yellowish undertone. So I think that works well for that area. And I will come back and add some more detail to him later on towards the end of the coloring. But for now, I'm just going to let him dry. I'm going to move on to this little bug that is toward the top right side. And I'm going to color every other stripe with the darkest two green shades and then every other stripe with the lighter two green shades for his body. I'll use the lighter greens on his face. And I'm also going to do the butterfly's body, but I'm going to use the YG13, YG11, and the G20 for that. Next, I'm going to work on my mushroom stems. For those, I'm going to use E40, E41, and E42. I'm going to use the same shades for all of the mushroom stems, and then I'll do the caps a little bit different depending on the style of the mushroom. But I'm starting with the E42 and laying in some shadow. I'm just working on the first cluster down in the center, the biggest cluster first. And then I'll blend out that E42 with the E41. And then I will bring in that E40 for a bit of highlight. Just filling in any remaining white space. For these two, I put the shadow on the right-hand side just because that's the way the largest cap was tipped. And then I'm going to do the other three mushrooms the same colors, but I did the shading for the small one by itself at the top on the right. And then the bottom two I did based on the way that they were facing. So the taller one is leaning a little bit to the left and the shorter one is leaning a bit toward the right. So that's how I chose to place my shadows. And once I had all of those filled in, I did go back in with the E42 on all of those to add an extra bit of darkness because I felt like some of that contrast got lost and I just wanted to have some more of that in there. I also used those three shades for the cut edge of my stump. And then for the rest of the stump, I'm going to use E43, E44, and E47. So the same family, just going a step darker. So I'm going to start with that E47 on the outer edges, and I'll also add a few of the lines that are drawn in there in that darker shade just to create a bit more of a texture with that wood grain. And then I'll start to blend that out with the E44 and then fill in the rest of that stump with the E43, just coloring right over any of those little lines that I traced. And I'm also going to do the little cake. I wanted it to have a chocolate frosting, so I just used the darkest two shades for that. And I'm going to do every other stripe on this other little bug. I stamped him incorrectly the first time. I didn't get quite enough pressure on the end of his trumpet, and then I tried to draw it in and it was a total fail. So I had to stamp him a second time, but I didn't want to have any black on this card. So instead of doing a bee that is black and yellow, I decided to do dark brown and yellow, and I do like how that turned out. I think it just gave him a bit of a softer look. For his yellow stripes, I'm going to use YR20, YR21, and YR23 because I wanted more of a golden yellow to match the yellow that is in that pattern paper. But it wasn't quite bright enough for me, so I am going to fix that in a minute. I'll also use these shades to do the small single mushroom at the top left corner. I just wanted to have a couple little pops of that golden yellow because it's such a warm, comforting color. I did go back in and add a second layer of the darkest shades because I just wanted it to be a bit more contrast on there. And then for the lighter shade, I brought in Y11 to brighten up that combo, and I put some of that on the B as well. I'm going to do my cake as a yellow cake. So this time I'm just going to skip over the YR20. So I used the YR23, the YR21, and then the Y11. And I will color the bird's beak in this combo as well. For the rest of my bird, I wanted to pull out some of those soft purpley tones. So I'm going to use BV11, BV13, and BV17, starting with the BV17 on the top edge of the wing and the tail, along the back side of the bird, and up around the right side of the face. Since his left side is tilted more toward the light, I'm going to make that just a little bit softer. Then I'll blend that out with the BV13. And just make sure that I'm going over the edge of the previous shade so that it kind of breaks up and becomes really nice and soft. So I don't want to leave behind any harsh lines. Next, I'm going to bring in the BV11. But again, I wanted the belly and the face to be a little bit lighter. So I'm just going to leave that white for now, and we'll come back to that in a minute. But I'll fill in the wings and also the top of the head with that BV11. There's actually two different tones of purple flowers in that pattern paper. One is more cool toned, which is what I just used the BVs for, and the other one is a bit warmer toned, so that's what I will bring in for the rest of the purples. But before I do that, I did want to do just the top part of the bug's wings with those darker shades. And then I wanted to bring in some lighter tones of those same colors, so I brought in BV quadruple 0, BV 00, and BV 01. That's what I'm going to use for the bird's belly and face. So I laid the BV 01 in first, then blended out with the BV 00, and then used the BV quadruple 0. It did push too much away on the belly, so I did have to go back and kind of blend over that to fix it a little bit until it was nice and soft again. And then I'm going to use the BV 00 and the BV quadruple 0 for both of the bug's wings. And I did leave a little bit of white space on the tips just to make them look really nice and light and almost translucent. I'm also going to do my butterfly, but I wanted the butterfly to have kind of a two-tone effect. So I'm starting with these three shades, but I'm going to leave the edges of the wings, and for that I'm going to use the other purple tone. Like I mentioned, the two different purple tones in that pattern paper, one was cooler, one was a bit warmer. So for the warmer purple tones, I brought in V000 and V01. I'll use that on the end of the butterfly's wings and just blend them together a bit where the BV and the V meet up. I'm going to come back to those V's in a little while, but for now I'm going to add some rosy cheeks to all of my critters using R11 and R20. Mainly just the R20, but whenever I needed to, I did blend out with the R11. I did that on the bird and also the frog, just softening the edges of the R20 with that R11 so it fades a little bit into their skin or fur tone. And then I'm going to bring in R22 because there is kind of that corally pink flower in that pattern paper. And I'm going to do my balloon in these shades. Starting with that R22, I'm going to do a little bit of a darker edge around the outer part of the balloon and then blend in the center with the R20 and leave a little bit of highlight in the center for that R11 to just fill that in. Then I'll keep that R22 and add in the R24 and R29 to pull out the darker red flowers in that pattern paper. They still have a bit of a coral cast to them, which is why I chose to keep in the R22. So I'm going to do my two larger mushrooms down in the center of the stamped sheet. So I'm starting with the R29 and I'm putting the shadows on the right hand side just as I did for the stems and carefully coloring around those little white spots because I want to leave them white. I did bleed a little bit into some of the smaller ones, so I will go back and fix that as well. It's really easy to do, but yeah, I tried to avoid coloring in them as much as possible. And then I'm going to use that R22 for the highlight, and I'm just coloring in little circular motions to break up the edge of the previous shade and just keep it nice and soft and smooth so that everything is well blended. And then because red is such a vibrant, pretty, eye-catching color, I wanted to have it in at least one other place on the card. So I decided to do the ribbon on my gift box. So I'm just putting the darkest shade wherever that fabric is kind of stretched around the edges of the box or tied together. And then the highlights are where it is most catching the light, like the ends of the bows and the tails of the ribbon. So I am going to go back to those V shades like I mentioned. I'm using the V000 and the V01 to do my last two mushroom caps. And I'll also use them to add a little bit of shading to the plate and to color in the gift. The one thing that is tricky about using a pattern paper with so many colors in it is that it's hard to think out ahead of time what exactly is going to be colored in which tones. There's just so many different options when there's this many images and this many colors to choose from, but I tried to do a good mix of everything that I was using and have it show up at least twice on the card if possible. So there were a few little things that I left to the end because I just wasn't sure how I wanted to color them. I knew that I wanted the horn to be golden, but not the same yellow as the little bug, so I ended up pulling out Y15. And I also decided to do some of my notes with that shade, which then prompted me to pull out a few of the other colors that I'd already used for the rest of the notes, because again, I didn't want to bring in any black, so I thought maybe the colorful notes would be something different. And then all that was left was the little instrument that the top bug is holding, and then the grasses. And the grasses, I wanted to make sure that they were not the same green as the frog, because I just wanted them to look a little bit different and have some contrast against him. So I went with the darker green background of that pattern paper, and for that I pulled out G43 and G46. So I'm going to do all of my grasses with those shades, and then I am going to come back in and add a few little details to my frog. Like I mentioned, I wanted to give him some more spots. He has a few that are drawn on the top of his head, but I just wanted to give him some extra so that he has a bit more personality. So I did that with the G46. And then I'm going to grab a white Sakura Jelly Roll pen, get that going off to the side, and go over the white spots on my mushrooms wherever I needed to fix any color that kind of bled into the little spots. So that's a really quick and easy way to get those really bright and white again. And then I'm also going to use my black Sakura Jelly Roll pen and get that going off to the side and go over the eyes of any of my critters that have their eyes open, which I think is everybody except for the bird. But this just makes them so bright and shiny. It really brings your critters to life. I love to do this step because it just makes a huge difference. So I'm going to trim these images out with their matching dies. So I'm going back to my Flora number 6 pattern paper pad and choosing a print to go with the one that I used as my inspiration. And I wanted to go with something that was much more neutral to balance out all of the color that was in the first print. So I'm going to trim those both down using the Hello Bluebird gallery frame number 7. I will set aside all of the little squares. I don't need those for these particular cards or this particular card. And then the other two, I'm going to swap the inner piece. So I'm only going to use one of these frames in today's card, but I will save the extra frame so that I can make another card on another day, and it'll be really quick and easy to do because the frame is already put together. So I'm going to take some regular Scotch tape and just tape the two pieces back together so that I can pop that up with some foam tape to give the card a bit of dimension. One piece of tape is a little bit too wide to add to this panel, so I just tear it in half, and that way I can use less strips as well. And I'm just going to tape both of these together, and then I'll decide later on which one I want to use for today's card. And then, like I said, I'll just tuck the other frame in with the pattern paper pad so that it's ready to go on another day when I want to make a card but maybe don't have quite as much time, so I've already got something started. For the background, I've taken a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock and trimmed that down to be 5 by 5 inches. The pattern paper frame is 5 1/4 by 5 1/4, so it's just a little bit smaller. And I'm going to watercolor a quick and easy background using some Distress Oxide inks. The shade that I'm using for this sky is Shaded Lilac. I'm going to go with purples because there's no blue in that pattern paper, so I'm going to bring out those little purple tones that are throughout. And all I'm doing is holding that pattern paper frame over top so I know where to drop my color in, and I'm picking that up off an acrylic block and just adding it to each of the 4 squares. Super quick and easy to do. And I really like how these watercolor wash backgrounds end up looking. So you get a lot of bang for the time that you spend on them because they really don't take very long. I'm going to turn the block to the other end and add in my grass shade, which is going to be Bundled Sage. And I'm just going to add a little bit of that down toward the bottom of the panel and let it mix with the purple at the bottom just a little bit. I'm also making sure to apply that ink rather roughly. I don't like to be too careful with it. I think it actually looks a lot better when you don't, because you get little areas that are a bit darker and a bit lighter, which just gives it more of that painterly look. So I'm just going to tap in a little extra color, and then I'll carefully lift off that frame and set this background aside to dry. Once it has dried completely, I will pop it in my MISTI so that I can stamp my sentiment. I'm going to use the Hello Bluebird birthday script for this, and I'll stamp that in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I'm stamping the sentiment in the top left corner over toward the right hand side of that. And I'm doing the one that says, "A little birthday wish with lots of love," which I think is really sweet. So I stamped that down twice to make sure it was nice and bold. And then I'll set that aside and pop my card base in my MISTI. That is Lawn Fawn Cilantro cardstock that I've scored and folded to be a 5 1/4 by 5 1/4 card. And I'm stamping on the inside using Lawn Fawn Noble Fur ink. And so I've got a little frog and some birthday elements and the sentiment, "Enjoy your special day." So now I'm ready to start assembling. So the first thing I need to do is decide which of these frames I want to use. And for this particular card, I decided to go with the one that has the floral on the outer part of the frame. So I've lined the back with foam tape. I'm going to peel off those release papers so that it'll be well supported. And I'm going to pop that up over top. So I'm just going to line that up, making sure that the flowers are in the right direction. And then I'll line that up so that all of those windows are centered, and then press that down into place. And then I'll add some liquid glue to the back of the painted background, and I'll glue that to my card front. So I'm just going to add that liquid glue and then kind of tap that on my work surface, pinching the corners together and tapping it to make sure that everything is on there nice and straight before I press it down into place. Then I can bring in my images, and I'm going to add those with a mix of foam tape and liquid glue. So I'm starting with some of the larger images, like these large red mushrooms, which I know are going to go in the bottom right side to kind of anchor and balance out the sentiment that is in the top left. I'll put some of the smaller purple mushrooms on the bottom right, and I glued those straight to the card because I wanted to pop up the frog and have him kind of jumping in front of those. So I'm going to add him, and then in the top right corner I'm going to add the stump, and on that I'll add the little bird. So again, that is all using foam tape. Just making sure that those are nicely centered where I want them over toward the right hand side. I've got this strip of grass that I want to add, so I'm going to glue that down. I will add a little piece of foam tape to the end where it is going to hang over the edge of the mushrooms, and I just cut that down super thin, and then I'm just kind of tucking that into that bottom right corner. Then in the top left corner next to the sentiment, I wanted to add the butterfly, and I'm going to pop that up on some foam tape as well. So I just trimmed down a piece that would fit nicely behind that, and then I'll add that right toward the top part, kind of with the antenna curved in to the sentiment a little bit, which I think just helps incorporate it into the scene a bit more. And then in that little square, I'm also going to add the small yellow mushroom over toward the left side. I wanted the frog to be holding the balloon, and it is mostly going to be popped up on the frame, but I wanted to just add a little triangle of foam tape in that top corner to help support it a bit better. And then I'll use some liquid glue to attach that so that the string goes into the frog's little hand. And I love how his other hand is also raised up, so he could be waving, but I wanted him to be holding the plate with the slice of cake on it. So I added that into his hand and just adjusted that until I liked the look of it. And then I'm going to take the little birthday present and I'm going to add that to the top right corner next to the stump, just to have a little bit more color and pop up there, and bring up some of those birthday elements as well. And then I'm going to add my two little bugs in the bottom right corner. So the bee is going to get added with some foam tape, and I'm going to tuck him back behind the edge of that grass over toward the left of that square. And then the other little bug is going to be on the right hand side, and he'll be over top of the grass, just to also create a bit of extra dimension in that little scene. And then I have some extra little grasses that I'm going to add here and there, just to kind of fill in the bottoms of the scenes and make them look a little bit more complete and like they match with the other squares at the bottom. So all that's left is the music notes, which I did have to trim down super tiny pieces of foam tape to fit behind those because I just wanted them to be popped up so it would look like they're floating in the air. So I'm going to put a couple in the top right square because the bird is singing, and also in the bottom right square because those little bugs are playing music. So just putting a mix of colors and shapes in each of those. And I really do like how those colored music notes turned out. I think that just adds a little bit of extra fun to the card. So now I'm going to bring in some Stardust stickles and add a little sparkle to my card. I'm not going to go too crazy with it, but I just wanted to have a few little flashes of glitter here and there. So I put it on the ribbon, on the gift, and on the butterfly's wings, on the balloon, and on the bug's wings. And then I also am going to add it to the frosting on my cake. And that is going to finish off this card. So I will lift that up so you can see it in a bit more detail and also give you another peek at the inside. I think this one turned out super vibrant and fun. I am so ready for springtime. So I was just in the mood to create something colorful and vibrant with flowers. So I hope you enjoyed it too. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted whenever I post a new video. All of the products I use will be listed and linked in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I will see you soon in another video. Bye-bye.